So hi everyone, this is Dr. Alana James, and today's topic is a big one. It's data literacy and data integrity. This is just a beginning exploration. We are not going to go into it nearly as much as we could, but we're going to give it a good start. So thank you all for being with us, and hundreds more joining by recording. The basic premise is that the world is changing. They call it the fourth industrial revolution. All of you will be graduating into an environment where academic jobs are less likely and industrial jobs are more likely. And with that, the ethical responsibilities that go with being academically trained are changing. So these data, the idea of data, will interface with all of the 10 skills that the World Economic Forum have stated are important for all of us. And if you haven't investigated those 10 skills, I've put them over to the side. And there are 2 box sets under your resources tab on the Doctoral Net sites. We have a box set for the cognitive skills, and we have a box set for the attitudinal skills. These are the things that interviews and CVs and resumes will need to address. So they're very important. And data are part of all of those. Therefore, data integrity is part of all of that. And as we go into a world that has a lot more AI interface, then we see that ethical considerations are becoming bigger and bigger. And then with that, our need to have data literacy and data integrity grows. So I can't say too much about how important this topic is. We have reflective questions that start and end our conversation today. So you might want to give a minute just to think about where data interfaces with your life. And what you do to ensure that you can completely understand and that you are critical of the data that's coming at you. We'll have a little test of some of that in a minute. And then how you can ensure that your outputs remain congruent with known facts, and that your data, whether in whatever level, whether you're a master's student or a doctoral student, whatever level of research you're doing, or even thoughts for class you're doing, that your data output are ethical and congruent. So today's goals: to discuss data in our world, to challenge assumptions, to agree upon some protocols, both academic and personal, that increase our own data integrity. And just a quick conversation, if people wouldn't mind typing in a few answers. What kind of data do you work with every day? And we'll give it a second for people to give us some conversation, but this will set the tone. What are your data? Bathymetric data, both quantitative and qualitative. Secondary data, what topic for your secondary data? And these are research data. I would suggest that we also are using data for our weather, for our email contacts, for clinical, quantitative, excellent. Yes, Candy, of course. So our agenda today is to say what are data, what is data, and what are data. Data literacy, we'll challenge some ideas about that, kind of a fun way. Then what it takes to maintain data integrity, and from that into best practices, and then some ideas that will lead us deeper. Anita says that secondary data for human behavior research. So primary, secondary data, lots of data, and lots of bigger data. Larger numbers, more likely to read graphs and charts. Now, interesting question, what is or what are data? I came of age in a research time when data were always considered plural word in a dissertation. So I had it drilled into my head that data are plural, and that we would write our final PhD as data were, data are, etc., using all the plurals. And yet I find now that when we look at the definition for data, it's being divided more into data and datum. So you'll have to have a conversation with your university about where it stands and whether they want your data to be an is or a are. Facts, statistics collected together for reference or analysis, quantities, characters, symbols, assumed facts, and then when it's plural, a piece of information, an assumption or premise from which inferences can be drawn, and a fixed starting point of a scale or operation. And I think both are important because data, those finite pieces of qualitative or quantitative evidence, versus where we, what we pull together and what we take into account. Subtle differences between them. And Anita, I'm just turning off your microphone because it's rattling a bit in the background. Okay, so data in daily living. I asked where we use data, but if we look at the world we're in, and this is, I'm giving you the links all the way through. You can download the handouts, you can follow them. So data in health and well-being, everything from the Fitbit to the apps we use on our telephone to keep stronger and better and healthier, to how our hospitals are using data in every aspect of collecting evidence about us. Urban transport, being on I love it, being on a train and being able to look up and see when the bus or the subway is coming. Also rerouting past obstacles so people can get there quicker. Safety, of course, tracking objects and vehicles with GPS. This is safety. Every big truck or lorry on the road probably has GPS and their owners tracking where they are, tracking their goods, keeping them safe. I have a friend who does security work. He sells something that goes into ATM machines because people are regularly driving forklifts into the places where ATMs are and carting off the whole machine. And his company finds the machines again. How we save money, how we spend money, we turn off heat, we tempt ourselves with shoppers, economic development. This company, Global Pulse, is actually doing a constant social data scan, predicting job loss, spending reduction, disease outbreaks, according to what people are tweeting and posting, and predicting and understanding crime. Now, I have question marks after that one because at the Council of Graduate Schools meeting, we heard a speaker pointing out that if we're not careful about the ethical use of data for crime, what we'll be doing is actually developing more crime in, or catching more criminals, or actually developing more crime in underprivileged neighborhoods, while the same kind of crime can be going on in privileged neighborhoods and is not caught. So watching how we use data to how people are targeted because of their attributes is a very big issue for what we're doing. Okay, so lots of challenges. Today, we're talking about specifically data literacy in a graduate environment, and we're not going to watch this video, but I gave you the link because it leads a little bit to what I'm going to do next week with data visualization. This man is a startup engineer, and he talks about data literacy specifically in the journalistic field. And the chart behind him, the top line of going up and down is the constant, it's Google's charting of the search keywords for crazy cats or something like cats. So ever since the internet came on, lots and millions of people have been searching for cat videos and cat pictures. The lower line, the one that's going way up, is the line on global warming. So you can see that some things are coming along and we're getting more and more interested in them. And it actually overtook crazy cat videos. And his point was that people are using data to answer very real and important questions, not just to search for entertainment. And this is an important shift in how we are interfacing with our world. And he's making the point that data literacy is very important. So this particular company, I thought, had a really good list of what is data literacy. So let's take a point by point. And then you can answer for yourself, how much do you think this is true? So how much do you think you know what data are appropriate to use in every purpose that you're going to be using them for? Let's say scale to 1 to 4. And if you feel like telling others how you respond to that, it'll develop an interesting conversation. How much do you think how good are you at interpreting data visualization? Charts, graphs, infographics, etc. And how strong do you think you are in thinking critically about the information yielded by other people's data analysis? Understanding data analytics, recognizing when data is being misrepresented or used misleadingly, and communicating information to people lacking data literacy. So sometimes people will tell stories, won't they? And the stories won't have data in them, although they may be based on data. So how comfortable do you think you are with any of these particular tasks? Let's take A or B. A's on the left, B's on the right. One of these are 2 Facebook posts. One of them was taken down by Facebook because it was a false post, used the same kind of metrics as the Russians did for the United States political environment. So which, A or B, do you think is the false post? Anybody want to put up A's and B's? Ron says A. Anybody else? Couple of A's. So far, that's the vote. Anybody think it's B? Going once, going twice. Raise your hand if you think it's B. Well, you all would have done it right. It is, in fact, A. It was put up by, the thing to watch here on these, I have 2 of them. These are from the New York Times. And the thing to watch is when the post has an obvious type of influence that it wants to make on you. And the point is that as human beings, we tend to respond more to our we have an emotional response that's stronger than our response to data. So when we see data, when we take in information, we need to filter it for its reality check. And the biggest reality check in social media is whether or not the person posting it really is out to influence you. Here's another one. A or B, which one of these is the fake post? Mark says B. Couple of B's. Oh, this one got a little bit more of a divided vote. In fairness, I'm not sure I would have picked either one of these as being fake, but it was A, the one on the left. And what they thought was, it was only a Facebook page that was only up a couple of months. Primarily, their posts were not egregiously influential, but they were beginning to make statements about healthcare and eating your vegetables properly, those kinds of things, to the detriment of pharmaceutical drugs and that side of the what makes it healthy issue. So this was leading people down a line that would have had an influential track to it. They took it down. It's no longer, those pages are no longer around. And if you're interested, the link on the top of that had several others. It's an interactive page. You can click on it and it tells you more about these sites. But the point is that we have all kinds of information coming to us that we don't, it's difficult for us to have our filters up all the time. So there are 3 questions and some examples about those questions because of course the people who are in journalism are very concerned that they're not accidentally passing on data or ideas that actually prove later to be bogus. So question number 1 we all want to ask is, how were the data collected? What factors contributed to the way and reason behind the collection? So that's beginning to get to that influence idea. For instance, crime always on the rise. Crime in Spain grew by 3%. Brussels pray to increase crime from illegal aliens and drug addicts. Those types of reports are based on police collected statistics, and they're often based upon quote unquote true statistics. Okay, so let's take as an example the European Union. Their data is clean, it's not tampered with. But you could say that they have, I think, the police personnel respond to incentives, and therefore, if there is an incentive for police to crack down on drugs, the drug crimes will go up, such as smoking pot. So drug-related crimes in France increased 4-fold in 15 years because the government was incenting the police to find out about drugs. So you can't just take it that the consumption of drugs remained constant. So the next question is, what can we learn from these data? So rather than responding emotionally, we need to take the distribution into account. I love this one. 1 in 15 Europeans is totally illiterate. Now, what kind of a response do you have? Actually, it's true, because 1 in 15 Europeans is under the age of 7. And under the age of 7 does not have the level of literacy. So it is a true fact. You could state it, but it's a misleading fact. Done with the purpose of causing an emotional reaction that would take the reader down a line that the author wanted them to go, rather than one that was absolutely true. So the third question, how reliable then is it? Is the sample big enough? Were there lifestyle factors taken into account? Were the math behind the correlations done correctly? And obviously, we don't have the time to dig into every piece of data that comes our way. We're only going to do this for the ones that are important to us and for our work, but it is good to have these filters up all the time. Thanks, Liz. I thought that was interesting too. I'll stop for a second. Raise your hand if you have any questions or comments, and I'll let people have a moment to type. No hands going up, so it must, hand going up. We'll wait for Adrian. useful to get a little bit of conversation going. So if you had a thought about all of this and what it meant, please share. Mark shared a link with us. Thanks, Mark. Waiting for Adrian's typing, no problem. It's the pause and effect of asynchronous chat. Excellent, Mark. Good news. Anybody else have any good news they want to type in? Over the years, we develop a little bit of community here. People get to know each other's names. One issue I have with data is personal applicability. For example, while it might be true that 1 in 10 Americans develops type 2 diabetes every year, it actually doesn't really say anything about my personal odds. That actually was one of the examples I didn't include, Adrian, but it's really a poignant one. And they used the example of MS in a European country. And when you looked at the statistics, it looked like everyone had a 50% chance of contracting MS. What it actually said was there was a 50% increase. But if you only had 1 case of MS, then it would have doubled to 2 cases of MS. It had to do with people who worked nights. So taking the data and the ideas and drilling into what could be a fear-based position of what it means to us is really not to our benefit. And probably the best way is to go and have a conversation with the healthcare professionals or the other people we trust about things we read if they're upsetting to us, and ask them what they see in their particular environment. So yeah, very, very good point, Adrian. And good, Mark, I'm glad to hear that you're going ahead. All right, so now we're ready to start our third chance here, which is the conversation about maintaining data integrity. And I just have to say, starting that the potential for spurious information is beyond rampant because of the complexities of data analysis. So we have bigger and bigger populations or examples of data. They're often crunched by machines. Machines can make a change, or you can put in what you think is the right way to move the O's and the ones around, and then you can completely develop problems with your data. And in fact, it just happened with me today. As I'm uploading a database, I told Excel to do a find and replace, and it ended up finding and replacing a whole bunch of things that weren't in, set me back 45 minutes in time. So, and that's just a small database. You can imagine what it's like for people who are working in very large data. And that means that we have to be on the watch for things that just don't make sense. And even data that come from sources that we would absolutely trust, such as our government, etc., can have data analysis issues. So something that's going to happen more, and I predict that we're going to start seeing news stories about data that were in large databases that had flaws in them because of this kind of problem. So we should take a look at the fact that there's actually two kinds of data integrity. There's physical integrity and logical integrity. Physical integrity has to do with the same kinds of issues. And I predict we're going to see the IRBs are going to change, the questions that they look at when it comes to this as well. Up until now, basic IRB questions have been how you stored it, how you stored your data, how you protected it from other people, how your individual human subjects were protected from their names, etc. But I think they're going to certainly governmental grants, etc., will start asking questions about how your databases are backed up. Things tend to erode over time. The human errors magnify. So how will we all protect that? How will we have the baseline, and then what do we do? And I think these are questions that if you're working with any large amount of data, you ought to bring into your research now, because real quickly they're going to be required. Local integrity, logical integrity, I mean, has to do with, does it make sense? Is it correct, or is it rational, given a particular context? Because we all know that instances taken out of context become irrational. Both physical and logical integrity often share many common challenges. So human error, design flaws, ability to get in and have it hacked, request to record, retrieve, etc. All of us are just going to have to get better and better and better. As Mark mentions, data breaches. You know, I don't know if you followed the fact that over $500 billion of damages were done to a couple of large pharmaceuticals and some shipping companies last year, as because of a data breach. Their whole systems were brought down. We're going to start seeing that, and logically, one outcome of that is that the international level of the internet will start having differences. We'll start seeing kind of protective walls around the internet use within our countries. Cross-country internet use will begin to have some changes. We see it coming. When it'll happen, we don't know, but it's all part of this data integrity challenge. So, user-defined data integrity. What sort of data were accessed? If outside sources were used, what credibility checks were run? Once integrated and used as a data set, what protections were enabled? And if data are shared collaboratively, what constraints were in place for overwriting or improper manipulation? As researchers, I recommend you download the handouts and you clip this screen, because these are the questions that your methodology sections should be addressing. Adrian mentions newspaper site that publish satirical articles. We're going to start seeing issues about free speech when it has large populations of potential damage that come with it. How do we protect? It's a very interesting time. So, any comments about data integrity? Raise your hand if you have something that you want to type in. We'll certainly wait for you. Can you wait? In fact, I don't see anybody making comments, so that's fine. On another question, your hand is just below where you type your messages on the chat. Raise your hand if these ideas have caused you to shift some thinking about your own research and what is required. And J. Mark, I see that you might be typing, so we'll let you do that. Couple of hands going up. Excellent. That's what we hope to see, is that you're thinking about what does this mean to you. We would rather have you be on the head of the curve, answering too many questions, being completely literate, than seeing you be behind the curve. And here you are struggling to get your work done, and all of a sudden you have to answer these questions you hadn't really thought of. So, good. I have another question for you while we're waiting in case Mark is typing. Raise your hand if all this was something you already knew. Because I don't know, of course. Some of it was new to me, but perhaps it was all just stuff you knew before. Anybody? Okay, then I feel like we are doing new sum covered in courses. Excellent, Liz. Glad to know. We see what we want to see. Yes, and we respond. We can take that further, Adrian, and say, and we emotionally respond in the way that we have responded emotionally before. And when emotion drives our response to data without it being filtered properly, then we have situations where things can be more complex than they need to be. J. Mark says data integrity research is part of enhanced due diligence. It absolutely is. And due diligence is just beginning to crack wide open what it means and how we're going to respond. Okay, with that, a few best practices fall out of this. And I'm sharing at the top a set of slides that were done by a number of researchers at different universities that I found absolutely excellent. So if you want to dig deeper into this idea of data literacy and what comes out of it, these people had just tremendous slides. And so I'm giving you that link. But your best practice is check your sources, look for intent, spurious or not. That's a point of view. Continue to improve your knowledge of types and uses of data. Continue to consider it something we're going to need to keep learning. We don't know it all, and as soon as we know it all, it will change. Continue to improve our knowledge of how data analysis is evolving. The tools are changing all the time, and then how that influences design and visuals. Manipulate data practices, build our own protocols, do our own due diligence, and be completely transparent about those, and continue to build our own personal data communication skills. So, reflective questions again. Where are the data in your life? Might it be a situation where you look up and look around and are seeing more incidents of it than you would have had before this conversation? What are you personally doing to ensure that you completely understand and are critical of the data that comes at you? Are you reading social media like it's just this really benign entertainment? Because it's not. How can you ensure that your own outputs are everything that you want them to be? And I have just a few slides. Raise your hand if you have something that you'll say. I just want to point out that we, as a professional development company, feel that this is the first step, that another portion of this is to understand where we develop premises and go for outcomes that have at their base a fallacy in our logic. So Dr. Maria is going to talk about fallacies and challenge us to do better there. And then next week, we're going to play around with some data visualization and maybe look at the same data from different points of view and maybe play with some tools out there that will help us look at data. So Anita, I see your hand up, and I'm waiting for your conversation. We have lots of time. I flew through these slides today. So what that means is I'm going to turn off the recording. We can continue to have this conversation, or always is true with our webinars, if there's time at the end and you want to ask about any topic that has to do with university graduate life or thesis research or anything, that we will point you to other options, etc. So thanks for those hundreds watching by recording. I'm turning that part off now.